In 1837, in the state of Connecticut, USA, a boy was born and named John. His full name was John Pierpont Morgan, or simply J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan was the last person among the American industrialists. Unlike other American founders who were born into poor families, J.P. Morgan was born into a very wealthy family. His father, Junius Spencer Morgan, was a successful banker in London and was very rich, but he never gave J.P. any pocket money. There is a story that says he placed $1 million in cash in front of young J.P., and J.P. thought it was for him, but his father told him, "This is $1 million. Learn how to earn it." Then he took the money and left. He was placed in the best schools with all the best resources, but they never gave him any money, not even pocket money. They told him, "If you want money, you need to work for it." For example, he was told, "If you clean my office, I'll give you $1." J.P. Morgan had a tough childhood because he was often ill. His lungs were constantly infected, and he always coughed. In the 19th century, doctors were not very advanced and could not find the problem or treat it. He lived with this lung infection for many years until he miraculously recovered when he was 19. Despite being sick, he enrolled in the best schools and attended them. Finally, after many years, when JP's health improved, he went to find a job on Wall Street. When they found out that this was the son of the famous banker, they immediately hired him. However, when his father heard about this, he became strict with him, saying, "You used my name to get this job. If you want to disgrace my name, I'll stop you. Be careful." In 1859, when J.P. Morgan was only 22 years old, he took a big risk. With the company's money, he bought a Brazilian coffee ship and sold it the same day for a good profit to another company. Although he made a good profit, he was reprimanded. Both the company he worked for and his father told him that it was a worthless risk, and the entire investment could easily have been lost. J.P. Morgan replied, "You think like this, so I won't work here anymore," and he left. If you asked him why, he would have said, "They are cowards and can't be successful businessmen." While both his father and the company he worked for were successful, J.P. Morgan, as a young man, had tremendous self-confidence. He started his own business. A few months later, he met a girl named Amel Sturgis, and they got married, but his wife passed away after 4 months due to tuberculosis. J.P. Morgan was deeply saddened, and to forget the pain, he threw himself into his work. This was the same period when the American Civil War broke out, and since J.P. was only 24 years old, they told him he had to serve in the military. It was common back then for wealthy people to pay someone else to serve in their place. For $3,300, J.P. found a substitute to serve in the war. If you remember, Andrew Carnegie also paid someone to serve in his place, but he paid $500. You should know that it was during this time that J.P. Morgan, like Andrew Carnegie and Cornelius Vanderbilt, became wealthy, largely due to the American Civil War. For example, one of the things J.P. Morgan did to become very rich was buying old and outdated military weapons for $350 each. Then he had them repaired by a company and resold them to the government for $22 each, making a significant profit, 6 times the amount he invested. He was smart enough to realize that if he fixed these weapons, the government would need them, and he could easily sell them. By 1871, J.P. Morgan had a lot of money, but his father still wasn't satisfied and said, "You still have a long way to go before your experience matches mine." This comment from his father motivated him to work even harder and prove that he could surpass his father. So, he approached a successful American banker named Anthony Drexel and proposed that they start a large private bank together. They created the Drexel, Morgan & Co. Bank, which still exists today, but is now known as J.P. Morgan Chase. In 1871, when J.P. Morgan's empire began, his wealth and influence continued to grow. During this time, many American industries were monopolized. For example, Rockefeller controlled oil, Carnegie controlled steel, and Vanderbilt controlled railroads and shipping. However, Vanderbilt only accepted investors, whereas J.P. Morgan invested heavily in Vanderbilt's railroad company. By this time, Vanderbilt had grown old, and the company was now in the hands of his son, William. However, William lacked the ability his father had, and 2 years after his father's death in 1879, his failures led to J.P. Morgan making the largest railroad investment in the U.S. He took control of the entire western U.S. railroad system. Had Cornelius Vanderbilt been alive, he wouldn't have allowed J.P. Morgan to make this move. He would have done it himself. Williams' failures allowed J.P. Morgan to take control of a third of the American railroad industry. At 42, J.P. Morgan was now a well-known American tycoon, but his father still said, "You still have a lot to prove." Perhaps he was proud of his son deep down, but never showed it, and spoke to him in this manner. This is a photo of J.P. Morgan. You'll notice it's been retouched because he always said, "I have an ugly face and a big nose. Please retouch my nose in the photo before you print it in the newspapers." At the time, he was considered tall, but it's important to note that in the 19th century, people were shorter, with the average height being 165 centimeters, while J.P. Morgan stood at 188 centimeters. Back then, there were no telephones, telegraphs, or Skype, so wealthy individuals had face-to-face conversations. When two people discussed important matters, their appearances were very influential. J.P. Morgan's height and appearance were commanding and intimidating, which made people respect him more during negotiations. This was also true for politicians, especially in the past. For example, Otto von Bismarck's height and mustache played a big role in his influence, particularly in terms of his persuasive power. Similarly, Reza Shah Pahlavi's presence was so strong that no one could disagree with him. In summary, we want to emphasize that in the past, a person's physique, height, and appearance were crucial in influencing others. During this time, J.P. Morgan learned about a man named Thomas Edison who was doing something interesting. J.P. investigated and discovered the great inventions Edison was working on, so he quickly decided to invest in his work and help it grow. When J.P. Morgan started working with Edison, the Edison Electric Company was nothing special. However, after J.P.'s investment, the company began to grow rapidly, and with his support, Edison managed to electrify the first American city, part of Manhattan in New York. Of course, Nikola Tesla played a significant role in this progress, but he wasn't given credit for it. Since J.P. Morgan was the main investor in Edison's company, he told Edison that they should change the name of the company from Edison Electric to General Electric, the giant company that still exists today. You should know that Carnegie, at the age of 70, decided he wanted to spend more time with his family and said that if anyone wanted to buy his steel factories, he would sell them. Who bought them immediately? J.P. Morgan. He paid Carnegie $480 million and told him to go spend time with his family. Interestingly, years later, J.P. Morgan said he would have bought them for $580 million if Carnegie had asked for that. J.P. Morgan turned Carnegie Steel into U.S. Steel, which is still around today. And not only is it the first steel company in the world, but it is also the first billion-dollar company in the world. We now arrive at 1893, when a major recession occurred in the U.S. People exchanged their dollars for gold, which caused the U.S. dollar to devalue and the stock market and economy to crash. This was when a great opportunity arose, but it required someone with foresight to recognize it, and J.P. Morgan was that opportunist. He realized he could propose a solution to the U.S. government and help prevent the country from going bankrupt. He bought $650 million worth of gold bonds from the U.S. government. Keep in mind that in 1893, $650 million was an enormous amount. J.P. Morgan's move saved the American economy, but it also made his wealth and power grow exponentially. At that time, many people opposed him, saying it wasn't right for one banker to save the government, and no private individual should have that much influence. J.P. Morgan's power increased, and people grew increasingly critical, saying that no private individual should have so much influence. It seemed as though he was practically the ruler of the country. But J.P. Morgan was not alone. Rockefeller was on the other side, and it was during this time that the power of the wealthy surpassed that of the government for the first time. J.P. Morgan was the last person to be recognized as one of the founders of America. Please support us with subscribe, like, and comments, and thanks for your watching.